Today we're taking this and we're going to turn it into this. All within After Effects using simple compositing with footage we actually recorded ourselves, along with elements from Video Copilot's Action Essentials pack. Let's do it. So we're in After Effects, and you can see we have our shot right here of Mr. Ryan in our homemade tunnel freaking out. The first thing we're going to do is create a track null for our shot. So you're going to want to select your footage, go to the tracker work area right here, and again, if that's not there, you can always go up to the window drop-down menu, click tracker right here. You're going to want to click track motion, and that's going to bring up our track point that we can work with, and we want to find a good point to track our shot. Now, a good point would be this solid piece of rock right here. Why? Because it's in focus, it's sharp, it's a nice contrast between the rock and the dark background. So that's what we're going to use. So we're going to take our point, we're going to adjust to make it just right. I just want to get the tip right there. And now we're going to track through. And so when your track is done, we want to right mouse click in the composition, select new null object. We're going to name this null object to tunnel track, and just make sure that tunnel track is the one that it's going to apply the effect to. If the null is the only other layer in the composition, it should already automatically be the target, but just to make sure. I also want to point out that we only are using position within this track. We're not using rotation and scale, and that's because if we scrub through, you can see there is no dutching of the camera, and we do not push in or move out, and that is why we are only using position, in case you were wondering. So then select apply, hit OK, and now we have a nice track null within our layer. The next thing to accomplish is to create our rocks that we're going to have falling. So we're just going to create one right now, one pebble, one rock. With the footage that we filmed with, we're going to use a shot that's labeled 0004. Again, this footage will be available to you in, link is in description. Yeah, I can't talk well. So we're gonna drag that clip into our composition. You can see right there. And for the sake of my sanity, we're going to turn off the visibility of the clip below it. So we're just seeing the rock footage that we got. So all this footage is a $10 green screen with one light, and I'm just dropping a rock on the ground. As you can see, that's it. Drop it, pick it up. Just so you know, simple stuff. Okay, so first thing we want to do is right mouse click on our layer, go to time and select enable time remapping. Now we want to go to the first frame where our rock is fully in frame, not having any of it cut off, which will be right there. And we want to create a keyframe in our time remapping effect. And then we want to scrub forward to where the rock completely stops moving, which right there looks good. And we want to create another keyframe right there. And now we want to delete the keyframes at the very beginning and a keyframe at the very end, which if I drag through here is right there. As you can see now, what we're left with is a frozen frame at the beginning, then our video continues, and then it goes back to a frozen frame. Next thing we want to do is apply selective color, which is an effect, color correction, selective color. And what we're going to use with this tool is bring out the green and the green screen. So if we go to the colors right here in the effects window and select greens in the drop down menu, the cyan, if we push it up to 100, the magenta, we push it down to -100, and the yellows we push up all the way to 100. You can see if I turn it off, the green now is much more saturated, popping out a lot more, but it's not affected any other colors in our shot. And that's gonna help with the key, which we're gonna do right now. We're going to go to Effect, Keying, and select Key Light 1.2. Take our eyedropper right here, select the green, and then we can make adjustments in our screen mat drop down menu. We can also, if you see the view right here, we're looking at the final result, and you can also change it to screen mat to get a better understanding of what is going on in our key. And in this, we can see a lot of noise in the green screen in the black area, so we can go to the clip black in the screen mat drop down and just push up the number a little bit, and that's gonna help with that noise. You don't wanna overdo it, because then you're gonna get a terrible key. Oh my gosh, something just went up my nose. And you can see there's a lot of noise as well within our rock, which makes sense because it's a blurred image. So we can bring down the clip white as well to help bring out that noise within our rock subject. And if we go to final result, You can see it's looking better. We want to change the soft color right here for the replace method to hard color. Now you can see we have this usable key with our rock. Now to help with this key, we're going to create a mask around the rock itself. That doesn't have to be perfect, but it's going to help remove the dust here we're picking up as it hits the ground, and just little specks that aren't wanted for our key. So if we go to the frame right here where it's frozen, the first frame before it starts moving, and just start creating a mask around our pebble like so. We don't need to feather it or anything. Select M on our layer and click the stopwatch on mask path to create a keyframe. And now we're just going to scrub through and keyframe this mask around our rock. And a little tip, where the mask says add, I like to set it to none. So when we go to the next frame, even though it's out of the mask, you can still see it, and we can easily adjust to where it needs to be. And then when you're done, we can just put the mask back to add, and you are good. And now with the mask done, you can see that the key is looking a lot better. So now we're going to want to color correct our rock, because you can see, if I turn the shot back on, it's very warm, very bright. So leaving this shot on in the background, I want to right mouse click on our rock, go to effect, and go to color correction, lumetri color. We're going to bring the temperature down to -10 to bring out the coolness. Set the contrast to 15. Pull the highlights down to -30. Pull the shadows down to -100, bring the blacks up to 10, and then in our color wheels, we're going to push blue in the shadows and in the midtones and in the highlights just a little bit, and then we're going to bring our highlights just about all the way down. And we can see just in those quick changes how much this rock is starting to fit in the shot that we're working with. Okay, so now we're going to animate our rock to be a falling pebble in our shot. So what I want to do now is I want to scrub through and find the frame right when the rock hits the ground, which is right there. We can see it's coming down, and then boom, it stops. So with that, we're going to place it in our frame where it seems natural. And for this pebble, we're going to have it bounce off this rock right here, jutting out in the left screen. Right there looks good. The next thing we want to do is get our pick whip tool of that layer and connect it to the tunnel track. And now we want to scrub through back to the frame in which it first starts falling. And an easy way to find that frame is if we hit U, we are brought up with the keyframes. And if we see the first keyframe of our time remapping effect, that will be the frame we want to get to. And from there, we want to select P to bring up our position. Hit the stopwatch to create a keyframe, move backwards 4 frames, and drag our pebble up and out of the screen. And then on this keyframe right here, the first one, we want to right mouse click, keyframe assistant, and select easy ease just to have the motion ease into the keyframe. And if we hit play, you're going to see how we have a falling pebble now. And if you think the fall seems a little bit too slow, we can always go back to our keyframes and move the first keyframe just a little bit closer to our second, and we have this adjustment now. So I really like that, and the final touches we're going to do is make sure that we select motion blur for this layer so we get a nice natural blur as it falls, and then right mouse click, effect, go to blur, camera lens blur, and we're going to set the blur radius to 35. That way it matches this out of focus rock as well that it's landing on, which leaves us with this right here, and that looks great. So for one final detail for this falling pebble, we're going to just add a slight little shadow. So if we want to right mouse click in our composition, go to new solid, make the color black, hit OK, OK, and then I'm going to turn off the layer. And then with this black layer right here, we want to drag it down in between the pebble and our footage. And then I'm going to turn off the solid layer so we can see, and then create just a small little oval shape type mask underneath the rock. Then we can turn the layer back on. Let's feather it out to about 60, 65, something extreme. Go to the opacity, set it to like 45 or so. Make sure we pick whip our shadow to the tunnel track. So with this shadow, we'll have to keyframe the position. So let's go to when the pebble is falling right here, and let's hit P, create a keyframe, and let's move our shadow right below it, move ahead, and as you can see right there is when the rock moves over. We're going to create a keyframe about right there, create a keyframe, scrub forward in our shot, adjust the shadow, and select all of our keyframes, right mouse click, keyframe assistant, easy ease. And lastly, we're going to keyframe the opacity. So if we select T, click the stopwatch to create a keyframe. We can move that keyframe out the way because we'll need it, and then set the opacity to 0. And as the rock falls, right when it impacts, you want it to be where we had it fully, which not 100, let's have it at 45. And then if we scrub through as it goes back up right here, we want to bring it back down to something like 10 or 0. And then keep scrubbing through again as it comes back down. You see it comes back down, but it's standing up, so it wouldn't even create that much of a shadow, so we can go to something like 25. And then as it falls down even further, we can go to our 65 again. And that leaves us with this right here, which looks great. There's obviously better ways to make the shadow by actually keyframing a mask and stuff, but with this effect that we're doing, there's gonna be so many rocks falling down, it doesn't have to be so detailed because, you know, the audience isn't gonna catch all those things and it's gonna still look good. So in the shot, every single rock that you're seeing fall was done with this process. From the big ones, just scaling up the rock bigger, to the extremely small ones, just scaling it down, and obviously keyframing much faster as they fall down and bounce off the rocks. So after you had completed doing a multitude of different rocks, the next thing we want to do is add our dust elements from those rocks falling. So with this, we're going to use the Action Essentials pack from Video Copilot, and the shot we're going to be using is from the dust file. We're going to be using the dust falling 02, so we can take that, drag it right on top of our clip. As you can see in the shot, we have all these different trails of dust falling. So first thing I want to do is just scale this shot up immensely and stretch it very horizontally. And so I want to get just one of these trails right here. This one looks good, and just drag it right to where the pebble is falling that we're working with. Next thing we want to do is go to right mouse click, time stretch, and let's set it to 50, and that's going to speed up our dust to fall at a better rate. And now we just need to move the clip to have a better timing of when the dust will be coming out. Next thing we want to do is we want to pick with this as well to the tunnel track. I think you're seeing a pattern here with that tunnel track. Very useful little knoll there. And next we just want to create a mask around the bottom area of our dust particles falling to make it seem like it's falling behind the foreground rocks right here, not just directly in front. And this is a simple mask, so we just have the layer selected and just mask just a nice general mask around these foreground rocks right here. And let's add the feather to 25 and set the mask, instead of at add, set it to subtract, which has us quickly be able to have the dust fall behind the foreground rocks. The next thing we're going to want to do is color correct our dust. So again, effect, Lumetri color in the color corrections tab right here. And with the basic correction, we are going to bring the exposure down to -1.5. We are going to bring the whites down to -70. And we are going to bring the blacks down to -150. Woohoo! As before with the pebble that we worked with and the color wheels, we're going to push all the shadows and midtones and highlights more to the favorable blue section, and we're going to take the highlights and bring them all the way down. And the final thing is right mouse click on our dust footage, go to effect, blur, camera lens blur, just like before. And with this, we're going to keep it on a blur radius of 5. And we're also going to have the dust fade out, because you can see when I hit play, the dust just keeps coming and coming. I don't know, I feel like it's just going a little bit too much. So if we have it fall right there and then fade out from right there when it starts to thin out just a little bit. So here we have the layer selected, select T, click the opacity stopwatch to create a keyframe. Set the first keyframe opacity to something around 25%. Move ahead a little ways and then bring the opacity down to 0. And now select both keyframes, keyframe assistant, easy ease, and now we have a subtle dust element with the pebble falling down. And again, just like the pebble that we created, you can go crazy with this dust. There's really no rules, but for every single pebble and rock that's falling, you would naturally see dust follow that debris. So the next thing to do in this edit here is to add the final crash where all these rocks just So for that, we're going to be using this shot right here that we got of me just dumping every single rock that we bought for this film right on the green screen. And just as we did before with the Pebble, we're going to add selective color to bring out the green, a key light to remove the green, and then Lumetri color to color correct it to our shot. So when all those steps are done, we're left with this key, which honestly isn't that bad for how dusty it is. Dust usually doesn't work well with the green screen, but it's not horrible. What we want to do next is we want to scale it up to have these rocks that are falling basically cover the whole tunnel that he's in. So we need to scale it up about to right there. Looks good. And you can see as they fall, they're covering all of him, which looks great. What isn't great is you can still see the pebble that we made earlier. So in the layering, we just need to drag our shot above that pebble, and that will solve our issue right there. Next thing we need to do is just get the timing of the rocks falling. So you can see here as he reaches back in and goes away, we don't want it to fall on him, so we need to have them hit the ground right about there. So if we go through right there, looks good with the timing. Right there looks great. And now, as we did with the dust as well, we want to create a mask at the bottom so it looks like it's falling behind the foreground rocks. And make sure again that this mask is set to subtract and not add. And I feathered it out to 25. And next, make sure that we pick whip our footage to the tunnel track. So the next thing I want to do is just fill out this tunnel collapsing. We have our shot right here of, you know, these rocks falling right here, but I want it to be more full and more intense, I guess you could say. So what we can do is just Control D our shot, and then just shift over one of them, and then Control D another one, and shift over another one over here, and then we can adjust the timing to have one fall a little bit before the other, and so it's like the middle, the left, the right, just everything going down. That last sound effect was a machine gun coming down. And then we'll obviously need to adjust our mask on the two that we just copied, so we can do that now. Really easy if we just select the whole mask, drag it over, put it right back there. And again on this one, select the whole mask, drag it right over, no biggie. And that leaves us with this right here, right before we cut, boom. Okay, so the last thing we're going to composite into our shot is a dust wave right at the camera. And again, we're going to use Action Essentials pack of the dust and the dust at Cam 02 file. We're going to take that, we're going to put it at the very top of our layer, keeping the null on top. I just like to keep the null on top, nice organization. And if we look at the shot, we can see that this shot is just simply dust coming right at the camera. So let's scale the shot up all the way. Let's stretch it out just a little bit so it covers a good amount quicker. And if we play through, you can see it's going a little bit slow. Right mouse click, time, and we're going to go to time stretch and set it to 25. Now, we want to create a mask around it so it looks like it's coming from, again, behind the foreground rocks, but we're going to do something special with that mask in a second. So let's create a mask around these foreground rocks right here. All right, that looks good right there. And again, with this mask, make sure our add is set to subtract. And let's bring the feather up to 35. So with this mask, we're going to keyframe it to give it a little bit of an animated effect. With this dust building up right here, right about there, we want to create a keyframe for our mask. So we'll select M so we see mask path. Click the stopwatch to create a keyframe. And then let's go just a couple, maybe 4 frames ahead. And we can take all of our anchor points of our mask and just drag it down like so. Let's make sure the motion blur is selected for this layer as well. And so what this does is it creates this effect as if the dust is shooting at the camera and then going over these foreground rocks as well. Next thing I want to do is actually keyframe the feather as well. So if we can just go back to the same keyframes we created, hit F, and that's going to bring up mask feather. Select the stopwatch, and then hit U so we can see our other keyframes we created before. Go to the next spot of the keyframe that we created for the mask path. And then for the mask feather, we can put it at something like 100. And now we have this nice soft buildup as well with the dust going over the foreground rocks. So to color correct our dust, what we can do is we can just copy and paste the Lumetri color effect that we already had on the dust falling effect from earlier. So right here is what we have, the Lumetri color for that. We just Control C, select our dust going to the camera shot, and the effects control panel, we just Control V, and now you can see we have it nice and color matching with the rocks around it. You can see how our pebble right here that we created earlier just doesn't look right now. You see, it looks right there, but then as we move forward, you can see the focus changes, and we have a little focus rack to move the focus back here. So obviously, what you want to do is just keyframe the camera blur. But when you're doing the full out effect of the shot, you know, we have almost 100 different rocks falling. So what you can do is you can select all your rocks, pre-compose them, and then add a camera blur to that pre-composed layer, and then keyframe it from there to adjust all the rocks that need to have the blur keyframed with the focus rack. So for the final thing we want to do for this effect is we want to select everything in our composition and pre-compose it. And so with this one pre-composed layer, what we're going to do is we're going to add a camera shake that slowly builds over time, giving the effect of just the earth and the tunnel all around him rumbling as more and more debris is falling. So a simple way to add camera shake is just to add a wiggle expression to our shot. But again, we want it to build up over time. We just don't want it shaking like crazy automatically. So how do we do that? So what we're going to want to do is we're going to add 2 sliders to our layer. So slider controls, I should say. So 1, 2. And the first one we are going to rename and call it frequent. We can just frequency. And the second one we are going to rename to intensity. Now we want to select P on our layer and bring up the position. Hold down Alt and click the stopwatch to pull up the area where we can write our expressions for the layer. And so what we're going to want to write out is frequency equals effect, parentheses, quote bracket, or whatever you call these on the keyboard, and we're going to write out frequency again, and then create another parentheses right past that, and quote bracket, and type out slider. So from there we're going to hit enter, and now we're going to type out intensity equals effect, parentheses, quote bracket, intensity, parentheses, quote bracket, slider. You know, it's funny too, I just noticed I've been spelling intensity wrong every single time. And I know it's got an N, intensity. I swear I've been clicking the N, but it's just not showing up. But the fact that 3 times in a row I've missed that N makes me think maybe I just was spelling it incorrectly. It's okay that it's being spelled incorrectly though. That's fine, because it's just the word itself that the software is reading and not the actual meaning of the word. So the second line, we're done with that. We're just going to hit enter as well. And for the third line, we're going to write wiggle, parentheses, frequency, comma, intensity. And there we go. So if you're wondering, what we just did here is we basically told the software that the frequency is an effect that is going to be connected to the slider, and the intensity is also a usable effect that's going to be connected to the slider. And then we just wrote out frequency and intensity in the wiggle expression, which typically has 2 numbers representing how much the thing is going to wiggle and then how often it's going to wiggle. But instead now we have our 2 sliders hooked up to the wiggle expression, which is going to allow us to gradually make this camera shake over time. So right where we're at, we can create a keyframe for both sliders, for the frequency and the intensity, and we can move ahead in the footage, and we can just boost up both of these, let's say to 45, and select all the keyframes, right mouse click, keyframe assistant, easy ease. So the final thing to do with this shot is, as you can see, as it wiggles, as it shakes, we're getting clipping here on the edges here, and so we just simply want to hit S just to scale up to stop that from happening, and we can scale up to something like 107, and now we'll have no more clipping when it's shaking. Everything will be solid, and that, my friends, is how to make a tunnel collapse without making a tunnel collapse. Depending on when you watch this, the short film might already be public, but if you're watching it the day I post this, the short film is going public this Friday. So make sure you check it out. It's written and directed by me and my friend from last year. It's been through the film festival, circuit, whatever you want to call it, and now, yeah, it's going public. So check it out. Like and subscribe again, as I said before, if you want. Really appreciate it. Help support the channel. Have a good day or good night. I don't know what time you're watching this. Right now, it's late for me. That's cool. But yes, I will see you in the next one.